The crimson was a defiant splash against the muted canvas of Elmwood Estates. Not just any red, mind you, but a deep, unapologetic fire engine red, the kind that made you sit up and take notice. I'd stood back for a good hour, paintbrush still slick with the vibrant hue, a smug satisfaction unfurling in my chest like a silken banner. It was a statement, a declaration, a small act of rebellion in a neighborhood meticulously curated to conformity. My name is Eleanor Vance, and for 7 years I'd been a model citizen of Elmwood Estates. I'd mowed my lawn on Tuesdays, raked my leaves by Saturday afternoon, and always kept my trash cans neatly tucked away behind the pristine white fence. I'd navigated the labyrinthine covenants, the endless rulebook that governed everything from the precise shade of beige allowed on shutters to the acceptable height of garden gnomes, a topic that had nearly driven me to madness during a fleeting, gnome-induced phase. I'd been a good soldier, until now. The idea had simmered for months, a tiny ember of discontent fanned by 1,000 petty frustrations. It started with the perfectly manicured lawns, each blade of grass seemingly aligned by a laser level. Then came the uniform house colors, a predictable palette of taupe, cream, and the occasional pale gray. And then there were the lawn ornaments. Oh, the lawn ornaments. While I personally had no issue with a whimsical flamingo or a cheerfully grinning gnome, the sheer uniformity of them was stifling. Every third house seemed to sport the exact same set of solar-powered, dancing sunflowers. It was as if the entire neighborhood had been dressed by a committee with a severe case of beige-itis. My own house, a perfectly respectable colonial, had been painted a sensible dove gray. My shutters were a muted navy. My porch light, a tasteful brushed nickel. It was fine. It was Elmwood Estates. But lately, fine felt like a 4-letter word. I craved a spark, a splash of personality, something that whispered, Eleanor Vance lives here, and Eleanor Vance has a pulse. The red door was the answer. I'd seen it on a magazine cover, a bold crimson against a stark white facade. It had struck me like a lightning bolt. It was vibrant, alive, and utterly out of place in my meticulously muted world. I'd spent weeks agonizing, picturing it in my mind, imagining the reactions. A thrill, a shiver of delicious anticipation had accompanied the thought. So, armed with a can of Crimson Tide, a name that felt perfectly apt, and a renewed sense of purpose, I'd set to work. The process itself was cathartic, the rhythmic swish of the brush, the rich scent of the paint filling the air, the way the color bloomed under my hand. It was all a balm to my increasingly frayed nerves. I'd hum to myself, a jaunty tune that was probably far too cheerful for the solemnity of Elmwood Estates. When I finally stepped back, wiping a streak of red from my forehead, the effect was magnificent. The door pulsed with life, a beacon of individuality. It was a warm, inviting red, a shade that spoke of passion and zest. It was, in my humble opinion, absolutely perfect. I imagined neighbors pausing, maybe even smiling, a flicker of appreciation for something a little different. That imagined appreciation lasted precisely 53 minutes. The sound that sliced through the quiet afternoon air was not the polite murmur of admiration I'd envisioned. It was the insistent, almost frantic chirp of a car horn, followed by the crunch of tires on gravel. A sleek, almost aggressively silver SUV, the kind that screamed, expensive and judgmental, idled at the end of my driveway. And behind the wheel, a figure emerged, radiating an aura of righteous indignation that could curdle milk at 50 paces. Brenda. Of course, it was Brenda. Brenda Henderson was the unofficial, self-appointed, and undeniably terrifying ruler of Elmwood Estates. She was the president of the Homeowners Association, a title she wore like a crown forged from pure, unadulterated rule-following. Her silver hair was always impeccably coiffed. Her designer sunglasses perpetually perched on her nose, and her posture was so rigidly upright I suspected she slept in a corset. Brenda was the guardian of Elmwood's pristine reputation, the enforcer of its beige-toned dreams. She exited her vehicle with the precision of a drill sergeant, her eyes, magnified by her dark lenses, zeroing in on my front door like heat-seeking missiles. Her mouth, a thin, disapproving line, was already beginning to move. "Eleanor," she began, her voice a low, steely hum that carried unnervingly well. "What in the name of all that is holy have you done?" I straightened, a defiant grin playing on my lips. "I painted my door, Brenda." "You painted it?" she repeated, as if the word itself was an obscenity. "Eleanor, this is Elmwood Estates. We have standards. We have covenants. This atrocity is a direct violation of Section 4, Subsection B, Paragraph 7, regarding exterior color choices. I'd memorized the covenants. I'd lived by them. But today, they felt like ancient history, irrelevant in the face of my glorious red door. "Brenda," I said, my voice calm, perhaps a little too calm for her liking. "The covenant states that exterior colors should be harmonious with the surrounding environment. I think red is quite harmonious with a bright, sunny day." Her perfectly sculpted eyebrows shot up, disappearing into her hairline. "Harmonious? Eleanor, this is not a Tuscan villa. This is Elmwood Estates, and that color it's ostentatious, it's garish, it's loud." "And that's a problem because?" I prompted, enjoying the subtle tremor in her voice. "Because it disrupts the aesthetic. It lowers property values. It's an affront to the very fabric of our community." She gestured wildly at my door, her manicured hand trembling. "Do you have any idea what this will do? Other people will see this and think they can just do whatever they want." A wave of something akin to triumph washed over me. This was exactly the reaction I'd craved, albeit amplified. Brenda's outrage was a testament to the door's power. "Perhaps," I mused, leaning against the doorframe, the warm paint still slightly tacky beneath my fingertips. "That wouldn't be such a terrible thing, Brenda." Her face contorted, a fleeting glimpse of raw fury beneath the practiced veneer of composure. "You are being deliberately provocative, Eleanor, and I will not stand for it." She fumbled in her designer handbag, her movements jerky. "This is not a negotiation. This is a violation, and I have already taken the necessary steps." My brow furrowed. "Necessary steps? What does that mean, Brenda?" A smug, chilling smile spread across her face. "It means, Eleanor, that I called the authorities." The words hung in the air, heavy and absurd. The authorities? For a red door? My mind struggled to process it. You called the police?" "I called the appropriate authorities," she corrected, her tone laced with an infuriating certainty. "The Elmwood Estates Code Enforcement Division. They are on their way. And when they see this aberration, they will ensure that it is rectified." I stared at her, dumbfounded for a moment. Then a slow, incredulous laugh bubbled up from my chest. "You called the cops on my door, Brenda." "It's not a cop, Eleanor. It's code enforcement," she huffed, adjusting her sunglasses. "But yes, I have initiated formal proceedings, and I assure you this will be dealt with, swiftly and efficiently." She turned on her heel, her silver SUV a silent, gleaming testament to her power, and drove away, leaving me standing on my porch, staring at my beautiful, defiant red door, a bewildered smile still on my face. The cops. She'd called the cops on my door. The sheer, glorious absurdity of it all was almost too much to bear. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through me, a heady mix of shock and exhilaration. This was no longer just about a red door. This was about something far bigger. This was about the right to express oneself, even in the most meticulously controlled environments. And I had a feeling this was just the beginning. The crunch of tires on gravel, a sound as jarring in Elmwood Estates as a misplaced apostrophe in a legal document, announced their arrival. I peered through the sheer curtains, my heart performing a little jig of apprehension, mixed with a delicious, almost illicit thrill. Brenda's sleek, almost aggressively silver SUV, the kind that screamed expensive and judgmental, was parked at the curb. Beside it, a decidedly less ostentatious, but no less official-looking, white sedan idled, its engine emitting a low, almost mournful hum. Two figures emerged from the sedan. One was Brenda, of course, her posture as rigidly upright as a flagpole, her perpetually perched sunglasses obscuring her eyes, but not the thunderous disapproval radiating from her perfectly coiffed head. The other was a man, dressed in a crisp, pale blue polo shirt and khakis, his expression a practiced neutrality that hinted at a lifetime spent navigating petty disputes. Brenda strode towards my porch, her heels making sharp, decisive clicks on the flagstone path. The man, presumably the authority, followed a respectful 2 paces behind. I took a deep breath, the rich scent of the red paint still faintly clinging to the air, filling my lungs. It was the smell of freedom, of a tiny, glorious rebellion. I opened the door, the vibrant hue of the crimson a defiant splash against the muted canvas of my house. "Miss Vance?" Brenda began, her voice a low, steely hum that managed to convey both accusation and a chilling certainty. "I trust you understand the gravity of this situation." I offered what I hoped was a disarmingly pleasant smile. "Good afternoon, Brenda. And to you, sir. Is there something wrong?" The man cleared his throat. "Ms. Vance, I'm Officer Miller, Elmwood Estates Code Enforcement. Ms. Henderson has filed a formal complaint regarding your front door." Brenda huffed, a tiny puff of air that seemed to vibrate with suppressed fury. "A formal complaint. It's a direct violation, Mr. Miller. A blatant disregard for the established covenants. Exterior color choices are explicitly detailed in Section 3B, subsection 4, paragraph 7. She gestured wildly with a perfectly manicured hand, her knuckles white. "It's an atrocity. It disrupts the aesthetic. It lowers property values. It's loud." Officer Miller produced a small laminated card from his pocket. "Ms. Vance, as per the Elmwood Estates covenants, restrictions, and bylaws, all exterior color changes require prior approval from the Architectural Review Board. The approved palette for front doors is limited." He consulted the card, his lips moving silently. "Primarily muted tones. Grays, navies, perhaps a tasteful off-white. Red, especially a hue this vibrant, is not within the approved spectrum." "But it's harmonious with the surrounding environment," I countered, trying to keep the amusement from my voice. "It's a beautiful, sunny day, and the red just sings." Brenda's sculpted eyebrows shot up, disappearing into her hairline. "Sings? Miss Vance, this is not a whimsical flamingo garden. This is Elmwood Estates. We maintain standards. We uphold the integrity of our meticulously curated community." Her gaze swept over my lawn, then Brenda's, as if assessing the very fabric of suburban order. "Your door is an affront. It's deliberately provocative." I leaned against the doorframe, a delicious sense of calm washing over me. "I painted my door red because I wanted to. It's my house, Brenda. And frankly, I've followed the rules for 20 years. 20 years of sensible dove gray and muted navy. I craved a spark, a little bit of me. A little bit of you is precisely what the covenants are designed to prevent," Brenda stated, her voice tight with an almost panicked adherence to the rules. The word individuality itself is practically an obscenity in this community. It leads to chaos. It leads to this. She pointed at my door as if it were a venomous snake. Officer Miller, bless his neutral heart, shifted his weight. Ms. Vance, the complaint states this was an unapproved modification. We need to rectify the situation. Rectify? I repeated, a slow smile spreading across my face. And how exactly do you propose we rectify a painted door, Officer Miller? Brenda stepped forward, her eyes, magnified by her dark lenses, zeroing in on my front door like heat-seeking missiles. The door will be repainted, immediately, to an approved color. Failure to comply will result in escalating fines, and if necessary, legal action to enforce the covenants. Legal action? I chuckled, the sound a low, incredulous rumble. Over a front door? It's not just a front door, Ms. Vance, Brenda hissed, her carefully practiced veneer of composure beginning to fray. It's a symbol. A symbol of defiance, a symbol of everything we stand against. And what exactly do you stand against, Brenda? I asked, genuinely curious now. Against color? Against joy? Against the simple act of making one's home feel a little more alive? We stand against aesthetic degradation, she stammered, fumbling for the right words, her designer handbag clutched tightly in her hand. Against the erosion of property values, against the lowering of standards, against anything that deviates from the established norm. Officer Miller cleared his throat again, a more insistent sound this time. Ms. Vance, the directive is clear. The door must be returned to an approved color. You have 48 hours to comply. If the door is not repainted by then, we will have to initiate formal proceedings, which could include issuing citations and imposing fines. He handed me a crisp, official-looking notice. I took the paper, my fingers brushing against his. It felt strangely heavy, a tangible piece of this absurd, bureaucratic battle. Formal proceedings, I murmured, looking from the notice to Brenda's triumphant, albeit tight-lipped, expression. So, you've called the police, and now you're calling the code enforcement, all because of a splash of red. It's not a splash, Ms. Vance, Brenda corrected, her voice dripping with disdain. It's an eyesore, a bright, garish, offensive eyesore. I glanced at my door, then back at Brenda, and back. The red pulsed with a life of its own, a warm, inviting hue that seemed to mock the sterile beige landscape of Elmwood Estates. It was a beacon of individuality, a quiet shout of defiance against the suffocating conformity. And Brenda, with her rigid posture and her laser-like focus on minutiae, was determined to extinguish that light. Well, I said, a mischievous glint in my eye, I suppose we'll just have to see about that. Brenda's lips thinned into a disapproving line. You're making a mistake, Ms. Vance, a very costly mistake. Perhaps, I conceded, my gaze lingering on the vibrant crimson. But it's my mistake to make. Officer Miller nodded curtly. We'll be back in 48 hours to inspect. Good day, Ms. Vance. Ms. Henderson. He gave a small, professional bow. Brenda, however, offered no such pleasantry. She simply turned, her silver SUV a silent, gleaming testament to her power and her unwavering commitment to the beige-toned dreams of Elmwood Estates. As she walked away, her back ramrod straight, I couldn't help but feel a surge of exhilarating defiance. They wanted to rectify my door? They wanted to impose their will? They had underestimated the sheer, glorious absurdity of this situation, and perhaps more importantly, they had underestimated the quiet strength of a woman who had finally decided to paint her world in her own colors. The heady mix of shock and exhilaration was intoxicating. This wasn't just about a door anymore. This was about the right to express oneself, even if it meant ruffling the meticulously curated feathers of a neighborhood that seemed to have a severe case of beige-itis. The 48-hour deadline loomed, but for the first time in a long time, my house felt truly alive. And my front door, that beautiful, defiant red door, pulsed with a promise of more to come. The air in Elmwood Estates, usually as still and predictable as a perfectly manicured lawn, crackled with unspoken tension. Officer Miller's parting words, delivered with the measured gravity of a judge sentencing a hardened criminal, echoed in the sudden quiet. 48 hours. A mere 2 days to erase the vibrant crimson from my front door, to scrub away the defiant splash that had so thoroughly disrupted the neighborhood's muted canvas. I watched his cruiser recede down the street, a silver streak against the endless beige and dove gray, and a peculiar sensation bloomed in my chest. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was something closer to exhilaration, a heady mix of shock and defiant glee. Brenda Henderson, I knew, would not be appeased by a mere warning. Her righteous indignation, a force of nature in its own right, had been unleashed. She would be watching, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows perpetually poised to furrow, her thinly veiled disapproval a constant hum beneath the surface of Elmwood's placid facade. The word violation had been uttered, a dark cloud descending upon my otherwise unremarkable colonial. But as I stood on my porch, the scent of freshly applied paint still clinging to the air like a sweet perfume, I felt a surge of something far more potent than trepidation. I felt awakened. The 48 hours began its relentless march. I made myself a cup of tea, the comforting warmth a stark contrast to the simmering ember of discontent that had finally ignited. I sat by the window, my gaze fixed on the offending door. A magnificent, unapologetic beacon of individuality, it pulsed with life, a vibrant contrast to the predictable palette that surrounded it. Each time a car drove by, each time a lawnmower whirred to life, I tensed, half expecting Brenda's sleek, aggressively silver SUV to appear, a harbinger of further doom. The first 24 hours passed with a deceptive calm. No further official pronouncements, no ominous black SUVs lurking at the end of the cul-de-sac. Perhaps Brenda was strategizing, consulting her labyrinthine covenants, undoubtedly memorized with the fervor of a religious text. Or perhaps, just perhaps, the sheer audacity of my act had momentarily stunned her into a state of bewildered inaction. I allowed myself a small, triumphant smile. It was a fleeting fantasy, I knew. Brenda Henderson did not do inaction. The next morning, however, brought a subtle shift. A whisper. A rustle of leaves that sounded less like wind and more like furtive observation. I saw Mrs. Gable from next door, her face a mask of practiced neutrality, pausing her meticulous weeding to cast a prolonged, almost accusatory glance at my door. Later, Mr. Henderson, Brenda's perpetually henpecked husband, was seen jogging past, his eyes darting to my house with an almost comical discomfiture. The neighborhood was abuzz, a silent collective gasp rippling through its perfectly manicured streets. My red door had become the scandal of Elmwood Estates, a topic of hushed conversations over perfectly brewed iced tea and meticulously curated garden parties. I decided to lean into it. I put on some upbeat music, something with a jaunty tune that defied the oppressive solemnity of my surroundings. I even found myself humming along, a cheerful, almost mocking counterpoint to the quiet anxiety that was undoubtedly permeating the airwaves of Elmwood. I spent the afternoon pruning my rose bushes, ensuring they were in peak bloom, their vibrant pinks and yellows a secondary, yet still defiant, splash of color against the staid backdrop. Let them see that this wasn't just a momentary lapse in judgment. This was a deliberate, conscious choice. With Brenda's deadline looming, the anticipation began to build. It was a strange, almost delicious feeling, like waiting for a dramatic reveal in a play. What would her next move be? More official warnings? A neighborhood petition? Would she resort to the ultimate weapon in her arsenal? The dreaded HOA legal team? I found myself pacing my living room, a nervous energy coursing through me. I even considered repainting, a fleeting thought that was quickly dismissed. The idea of surrendering to Brenda's tyranny, of allowing her petty frustrations to dictate the color of my own front door, was more repellent than any fine. As the sun began to dip below the horizon on the second day, casting long shadows across my lawn, a new sound pierced the suburban stillness. It wasn't the familiar drone of a lawnmower or the distant wail of a siren. It was the distinct crunch of tires on gravel, a sound that always signaled an arrival, an intrusion. My heart did a little leap. This was it. Pulling into my driveway, not with the measured precision of Officer Miller, but with a sudden, almost aggressive halt, was Brenda Henderson's silver SUV. The vehicle itself seemed to exude an aura of authority, its polished surfaces gleaming under the fading light. The driver's side window rolled down with a soft hiss, revealing Brenda's face, a mask of severe displeasure. Her dark sunglasses, perpetually perched upon her nose, obscured her eyes, but I could feel their laser-like focus zeroing in on my front door. She sat there for a moment, a statue of rigid disapproval, the engine idling with a low, steady hum. Then her voice, a sharp, precise instrument, cut through the quiet. "Eleanor, we need to discuss your front door." I stepped onto my porch, a small, defiant grin playing on my lips. "Brenda, I thought you might say that." "This is not a laughing matter, Eleanor," she said, her tone devoid of any warmth. "You received a formal notice, a violation. This is a breach of the covenants." "The covenants?" I echoed, letting the word hang in the air. "The ones that dictate the precise shade of beige that is acceptable for exterior paint, I presume." Her sculpted eyebrows shot up, a barely perceptible movement that conveyed a universe of exasperation. "This is precisely the problem, Eleanor. Your unconventional color choice is disruptive. It lowers property values. It's an affront to the aesthetic standards of Elmwood Estates." She gestured wildly with a manicured hand, her voice rising in pitch. "It's garish. It's loud. It's a direct violation of Section 4, Subsection B, Paragraph 3, regarding exterior color choices." "Ah, yes," I said, nodding slowly. "The ancient history of exterior color choices. I seem to recall that particular section being written sometime in the late 1980s, Brenda, before the advent of, well, anything remotely interesting." Brenda's knuckles, gripping the steering wheel, turned white. "Irrelevant. The covenants are binding, and your door is a direct violation. You have 48 hours, Eleanor." "And it appears," she said, her voice dropping to a low, steely hum, "that those 48 hours have expired." The implication hung heavy in the air. She hadn't come to negotiate. She had come to enforce. "So," I said, my voice calm, though a tremor of excitement ran through me, "what happens now, Brenda?" A smug, chilling smile spread across her face, a rare and terrifying sight. "Now, Eleanor," she said, her voice laced with infuriating certainty, "we initiate formal proceedings. This aberration will be rectified, swiftly and efficiently." She adjusted her sunglasses, her gaze fixed on my door as if it were a personal insult. "You have made your choice. Now you will face the consequences." With that, she slammed her window shut, the hiss of the glass sealing her pronouncement. The engine's hum intensified for a moment. Then the silver SUV pulled away, its departure as abrupt and decisive as its arrival. I watched it go, the sound of its tires fading into the distance. And then I was alone again, standing on my porch, the glorious red door a silent, defiant testament to my rebellion. A wave of disbelief washed over me, followed by an almost giddy sense of freedom. Formal proceedings, consequences. Let her come. Let them all come. I had a feeling this was only the beginning. The exhilarating, absurd, and utterly necessary beginning. The low growl of tires on gravel, a sound usually punctuated by the rumble of the mail truck or the friendly squeak of Mrs. Gable's prize-winning poodle trotting to my doorstep with a freshly baked casserole, today carried a distinctly different, more ominous timbre. It announced the arrival of the Elmwood Estates Code Enforcement Division, a vehicle so sleek, so aggressively silver, it seemed to gleam with an almost palpable aura of expensive judgment. Brenda Henderson, the undisputed matriarch of Elmwood's architectural purity, was already out, a vision in a crisp linen suit, the exact shade of bleached bone, her impossibly coiffed blonde hair defying gravity in a sculpted halo. She stood beside the SUV, arms crossed, her posture ramrod straight, a silent, imposing sentinel guarding the pristine, beige-toned dreams of our meticulously planned community. Her oversized dark sunglasses, capable of obscuring half her face, acted as amplified magnifiers for her disapproval, their dark lenses zeroing in on my front door with the precision of heat-seeking missiles. From the driver's side emerged Officer Miller, a man whose uniform appeared to have been ironed with a laser level, each crease a testament to unwavering adherence to protocol. He offered Brenda a curt, almost imperceptible nod, then turned his steely gaze towards me, a thin, disapproving line etched between his brows as if permanently carved by the weight of suburban infractions. "Miss Vance," he began, his voice a low, resonant hum that never quite reached his eyes, a disquieting disconnect between sound and sentiment. "We've received a complaint regarding the exterior color of your front door." I leaned against my doorframe, the glorious, vibrant red pulsing warmly behind me, a stark contrast to the muted tones of Brenda's ensemble. "So I understand," I replied, my voice deliberately light, a playful lilt that I knew would grate on Brenda's nerves. "Brenda here was kind enough to inform me." Brenda's sculpted eyebrows, usually a picture of serene, aristocratic control, shot up, disappearing into the formidable architecture of her hairline. "This isn't a matter for pleasantries, Eleanor," she snapped, her voice devoid of the saccharine HOA pleasantries that usually coated every interaction. "This is a direct violation of the covenants. Exterior color choices are strictly regulated. It's not a suggestion, it's a mandate." Officer Miller, with the practiced economy of motion of a seasoned bureaucrat, produced a small, laminated card from his breast pocket. "According to Elmwood Estates Architectural Review Board Guidelines, Section 7B, Subsection 3, he recited, his tone as flat and emotionless as a freshly paved sidewalk. Approved exterior door colors include, but are not limited to, sensible dove gray, muted navy, and tasteful brushed nickel. Your current application of crimson is not on the approved palette." He pronounced the word crimson as if it were a particularly unpleasant foreign substance. I blinked, a slow, deliberate movement, allowing the absurdity of the situation to fully register. "You're telling me that my door is a violation?" I asked, genuinely incredulous. "It is a direct violation of the established standards," Brenda interjected, her righteous indignation bubbling to the surface, unable to be contained by any pretense of civility. "It's garish, it's loud, and it disrupts the aesthetic. It lowers property values, Eleanor. It's an affront to the very fabric of our community." She gestured wildly with a perfectly manicured hand, her knuckles turning white as she emphasized her points. "This is not some bohemian art commune. This is Elmwood Estates. We have standards, and you are flagrantly disregarding them." Officer Miller cleared his throat, a tiny, almost imperceptible tremor betraying a flicker of discomfort, or perhaps just the dry air of Elmwood's perfection. "Ms. Vance," he continued, his gaze fixed on some point beyond my shoulder, You have 48 hours to repaint the door to an approved color. Failure to comply will result in escalating fines and potential legal action." He produced a crisp, official-looking notice. Its stark white paper a stark contrast to the vibrant red behind me. I took the paper, my fingers brushing against the cool, impersonal print. 48 hours. It felt less like a deadline and more like a decree from some forgotten, dusty kingdom, a royal edict delivered by stern-faced emissaries. I looked from the notice to Brenda, her face a mask of triumphant severity, her eyes gleaming behind her sunglasses, then back to Officer Miller, who stood impassively, a cog in the meticulously controlled machinery of Elmwood Estates. A laugh, a disbelieving, almost giddy sound, bubbled up from my chest. It was so absurd, so utterly ridiculous, I couldn't help myself. I was being issued a citation for painting my own front door. It was a bureaucratic, Kafkaesque nightmare played out on a meticulously manicured suburban stage, a testament to the stifling grip of conformity. "So," I said, my voice still laced with amusement, my gaze sweeping over Brenda's impeccable facade, "you're telling me that if I don't repaint my door, what? The entire neighborhood will crumble into dust? The pristine lawns will wither and die? The beige houses will spontaneously combust?" Brenda's face tightened, her lips thinning into a precise, disapproving line, a miniature fissure in her carefully constructed composure. "This is not a laughing matter, Eleanor. This is about maintaining the integrity of Elmwood Estates. It's about order. It's about the standards we all agreed to uphold when we purchased our homes, when we signed up for this idyllic lifestyle." "The standards," I echoed, a wicked little smile playing on my lips, a spark of rebellion igniting within me. I looked at my door, the vibrant hue a stark, defiant contrast to Brenda's beige-toned world, a splash of audacious color in a landscape of muted conformity. "You know, Brenda, I think I've had my fill of standards. I've lived by them for 20 years. I've smiled and nodded and kept my lawn perfectly manicured, my hedges trimmed to within an inch of their lives, and my shutters the approved shade of muted navy. And for what? So I can be threatened with fines because I decided to inject a little bit of life into my own home, because I dared to express myself in a way that doesn't fit your narrow definition of acceptable?" Officer Miller shifted his weight, his polished shoes squeaking faintly on the gravel. "Ms. Vance, the notice is clear. 48 hours. He avoided my direct gaze, his eyes fixed on the laminated card he still held. "And what if I don't?" I challenged, my gaze locking with Brenda's. The defiance that had bloomed with the first stroke of crimson now pulsing through me, a heady, intoxicating elixir. I felt a surge of exhilaration, a freedom I hadn't realized I'd been missing. Brenda's smile, when it came, was chilling, a predatory glint in her eyes. "Then, Ms. Vance, the HOA will initiate formal proceedings. We have the authority to rectify violations. And believe me," she leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that somehow carried the weight of 1,000 pronouncements, the hushed tones of absolute power, "we will rectify this. We will ensure compliance, one way or another." She turned on her heel with a swish of her linen suit, an air of finality clinging to her like expensive perfume. "Come, Officer Miller. I have another pressing matter to attend to. A certain resident down the street seems to be allowing their azaleas to encroach upon the common walkway by a full 2 inches. Unacceptable." Officer Miller gave me another tight-lipped nod, his expression unreadable, and followed Brenda, the silver SUV, a silent, gleaming testament to their power, a mobile monument to suburban control. They drove away, the crunch of gravel fading into the quiet hum of Elmwood's manufactured serenity, leaving me standing on my porch, the official notice clutched in my hand, the scent of fresh paint and rebellion thick and intoxicating in the air. I watched them go, a strange, calm resolve settling over me. The initial shock had given way to a delicious anticipation, a thrill of the unexpected. Brenda was infuriating, yes, but she was also, in her own way, predictable. And predictability in the sterile beige landscape of Elmwood Estates was a weakness. She saw my red door as an aberration, a stain on her meticulously curated world, a visual cacophony that needed to be silenced. She saw it as something to be eradicated, rectified, and forgotten, a minor inconvenience to be swiftly dealt with. But she was wrong. My door wasn't an aberration. It was a declaration. It was a vibrant, unapologetic statement that I, Eleanor Vance, was still here, still vibrant, still capable of making choices that weren't dictated by a committee with a severe case of beige-itis. It was a symbol of my individuality, a quiet rebellion against the oppressive sameness. I tucked the notice into my apron pocket, the papery weight a small reminder of the battle ahead. I surveyed my handiwork, the rich, bold crimson that seemed to pulse with life, radiating warmth and defiance. It was a color that spoke of passion, of vitality, of a spirit that refused to be subdued. It was a beacon of individuality in a sea of conformity, a splash of audacious color designed to awaken the senses. And Brenda Henderson, with all her rules and regulations and self-appointed authority, wasn't going to change that. Not without a fight. I had 48 hours. 48 hours to prove Brenda wrong. 48 hours to show her that the spirit of Elmwood Estates wasn't confined to a color palette, that true community wasn't about suppressing individuality, but celebrating it. I closed my door, the rich scent of the paint, still faintly clinging to the air, a balm to my frayed nerves, a sweet perfume of defiance. The jaunty tune of a cardinal chirping in the ancient oak tree outside was the only sound, a cheerful counterpoint to the oppressive silence of conformity. For now, I had a feeling the melody of this neighborhood was about to change, its staid rhythm disrupted by a bold new tempo. And I, Eleanor Vance, with my defiant red door, was going to be the conductor. The overture had just begun. The 48 hours ticked by like a bomb. Brenda, predictably, did not let up. Her silver SUV made several strategic passes, its polished presence a constant, unnerving reminder of the looming deadline. I saw her talking to other neighbors, her gestures animated, her face a mask of concerned outrage. Whispers, I imagined, turned into hushed phone calls, then perhaps even a hastily convened emergency HOA meeting. The storm I had unleashed, a tempest of crimson paint in a sea of beige, was gathering force. On the morning of the deadline, as the sun painted the sky in hues far more vibrant than any Elmwood Estates would ever sanction, I stood on my porch. My door remained resolutely, gloriously red. I'd spent the night not agonizing, but planning. I'd brewed coffee, listened to upbeat jazz, and reread sections of the Elmwood Covenants, not with dread, but with a newfound, almost gleeful understanding of their inherent absurdity. The familiar crunch of tires announced their arrival. Brenda, of course, was at the wheel, Officer Miller a stoic passenger in the passenger seat. This time, however, they weren't alone. Trailing behind them, like a flock of timid beige-colored birds, were a dozen or